Final Fantasy Magic the Gathering cards have sold out, and it is the best-selling promotion in the decades-old card game's history. Wow, wonder what this Final Fantasy thing is about. Sounds like it'll be going places. People adore this game, this franchise, so Square Enix, what is your problem? Why are you messing up these games over and over? People want this. This is one of the few multi-decade-old franchises that, despite several underperforming games, still has a mostly overall positive audience sentiment about it. According to Hasbro CEO Mr. Cox, aptly named for how hard he has butt-pounded D&D into the AI designed by committee mess it currently is in, the MtG and Final Fantasy cards sold $200 million worth of cards in a single day. Well, let's just repeat that, 200 million in a day. That would put this above almost every video game ever released, not just by Square Enix, but by any company. That alone would save any of their recent unfortunate bombs. This is what the Lord of the Rings set, which included that Scalper Dream, the One Ring card, sold in half a year. And this is a very Western-focused card game. Final Fantasy is huge around the world. It could be a top 5 biggest gaming franchises, yet they are bombing this franchise. And they're doing it by very avoidable, very obvious mistakes. They keep looking at what fans are telling them they want and saying, nah, how about we make this series more and more like Forspoken instead? Because that did so well. This is not a complicated thing. Fans are eager to tell you what they want. You took efforts to censor Tifa for some reason until you brought out those swimsuits and people went crazy. You decided to make Final Fantasy 15 a boy band road trip for some reason. You've gone away from the turn-based RPG formula. What has Claire Obscure taught you about that? And Final Fantasy 16 was another cinematic action combat movie game in a sea of exactly those games from every studio. You changed the Final Fantasy VII story drastically. You're bringing out a Final Fantasy Tactics game with updated localization for the modern audiences like you haven't learned a damn thing. And where's Final Fantasy IX? We know you hear people asking for it. You are sitting on a wealth of massively popular IPs like Chrono Trigger, Secret of Mana, Ogre Battle, and you're doing nothing with them. And you also have lesser known, but still great ones that could be huge. The likes of Parasite Eve, Vagrant Story. Vagrant Story is like Dark Souls with turn-based combat. It has a half horror-style dungeon, solo-style combat. You think that wouldn't do well today? You can't turn Parasite Eve into an action horror game? Look, Final Fantasy XVI is a great game, and it underperformed. Problem is, it was the wrong game. It plays great, and the cinematics and storytelling are top-notch, almost like a movie. But people wanted to play a game, a Final Fantasy game in particular. Sure, this game has chocobos, dragoons, and well-known primal summons, but where's the variety of classes and abilities? Why can you only play one guy the entire game? Where's the party dynamics? You're effectively alone, unable to power up or customize allies. Level design is lackluster all around, it's annoying walking around the main hub, the open world zones are generally bland, the chapter dungeons linear with a just go forward structure so common to modern games. Elemental damage means nothing in the game, which has long been one of the core elements to a Final Fantasy game. RPG systems like items, character abilities, crafting, gear feel mediocre at best, worthless at worst, and a tedious chore. The game is combat, walk, cutscene, all of which is done very well, but it's not what people expect or want from mainline Final Fantasy. This is a grounded, realistic take that brings the series much closer to medieval historical fiction than any other game in the franchise. Not just in lore and world building, but in the mannerisms, nobility struggles, and nation conflicts. It takes the already off the beaten path, darker fantasy of FFT, Final Fantasy XII, and Vagrant Story, and it cranks it all up. It is humorless, focused entirely on the stoic journey of the protagonist, a classical tale with many elements of Shakespeare, Greek plays, betrayal, hubris, grey morality, guilt, and a tragic hero. And again, it is a great game, but doesn't feel anything like a normal Final Fantasy game, and that hurt it. Final Fantasy XVII is gonna need to have big explorable dungeons. It needs a mix of sci-fi and fantasy. It needs to have a party with great interactions. The sort we got with Zidane, Garnet, and Vivi, or Cloud, Tifa, and Aerith. The sort of ever-present villain we got with Sephiroth, or the Lucavi in Final Fantasy Tactics. And there is still room to pursue personal, touching stories like Locke's search for Phoenix, or Barrett and his hometown and daughter. It needs customization and RPG elements. Side quests need to mean something. Think about Final Fantasy VI side quests, the Meiji Tower, finding all of your friends in the world of ruins, stories that expanded lore and understanding of your friends. This is not an MMORPG. It doesn't need to expand a bunch of peasants you won't remember the names of. Their current direction is causing them problems, and not just with Final Fantasy 16 and 15. How about Final Fantasy XIV, Dawn Trail? There is no excuse for them not foreseeing the problems with their lackluster story, obnoxious lead protagonist, and complete lack of setup. They even nostalgia baited with the extremely long-awaited Final Fantasy XI raid, and that still has made this expansion a huge drop. And that was their meal ticket, their biggest current success. Final Fantasy XIV saw so much recent success, the game became huge. Due to a mixture of the pandemic, content creators jumping on it after massive problems with other games like Warcraft, and a long-running, carefully crafted, cumulative story that built up an amazing world, lovable characters, and a great setting to play in. Endwalker saw the end of a decade-long storyline. It was an incredible finish full of drama, emotion, and epic finales to many character stories. Dawn Trail had to be the start of the next story, and it has not done that well. It was also a chance to change some things up. Maybe try to revitalize the PvP and raid scenes. Do something new with casual play. Instead, the game is structural mimicry of the last few expansions. It does almost nothing new. Just like Final Fantasy 16, it's still good, there's still some great raid content, and it has some of the best feeling dungeons in the game. But it is doing nothing new. It is very clearly not providing enough for people on the gameplay part. People that expected something was going to evolve with the game. And on the story and world building half, it is the worst the game has ever been. At least since before Reborn. The idea of characters taking a break, pursuing some non-world ending pursuits, finding out some of the hobbies and side things that long-loved characters are into as they take a bit of a vacation, it's actually a great idea. The entire backdrop for Dawn Trail is not the problem. It's actually an amazing hook for them to pursue, fun adventuring for a while until the next major threat pops up and draws them in. The execution is the problem, and the question is what is even being set up here? Yes, there's a villain in this story. There's still the looming threat of the other shards. But if we were to compare this with A Realm Reborn, ARR was setting up 20 different hooks and paths between primals, the Ascians, the Empire, the conflicts between 3 very different nation states, the civil war and attempt to kill the princess, hinting at the dragon and Ishgard zealotry, the refugee crisis from Alamigo, and all over there were major points of conflict. Everything that happened in the next expansions was set up in A Realm Reborn. In Limsa, the conflict with the Beastmen, in Gordania, the general isolationism. In Ul'Dan, several types of conflicts, such as with refugees between wealthy and poor. All of these were set up, and they get dealt with over time, generally over multiple layers of stories where things will go worse, and then better, and then worse again, before finally everything mostly got neatly tied up in Endwalker. There's no conflict in Dawn Trail. Everyone gets along and you figure out and solve all the races in the area's problems immediately. There's a major problem with modern storytelling that unfortunately is spreading to the east. Writers used to understand that conflict and unpleasant frictions can lead to great stories and reconciliation down the road. Now, they want there to be no such conflict, so if any pops up, it gets fixed right away and people hug it out. Thus, nothing ever gets built, nothing ever lingers, nothing ever is given time to breathe. It's kind of like how every time there's a sad scene or an emotional scene in a movie nowadays, the next thing that happens is a really bad joke to break up the tension. It's so incredibly boring and a symptom of Western modern writing starting to colonize global creativity for the worse. The way these cards sold out proves that this brand still has massive power. Power that is not being utilized to create games that satisfy that same audience. And on a more personal level, Square Enix, with the likes of Final Fantasy, Chrono Trigger, Secret of Mana, BioWare with Mass Effect, Neverwinter Nights, Dragon Age, and The Old Republic, Bethesda with Fallout 3 and Skyrim, Blizzard with Diablo and Warcraft, these were our childhoods. This was a fantasy landscape in gaming since the 1980s. Decades of some of the greatest games ever made and franchises that still should be at the top of their game. But they aren't. All of these companies have taken their success for granted and torpedoed worlds that some of the best developers and fantasy writers brought to life. Worlds that we've been part of all our lives. Final Fantasy may not have had the most success in their games recently, but at the very least, those games did not torch the franchise, like what we saw with Dragon Age the Veilguard. People still love and want more from Final Fantasy, and what good game that draws more from Final Fantasy IX and less from Game of Thrones is all it's gonna take for it to be back. But it's just tiring having to watch these series bury themselves over and over. So wake up and do better. But that's all. We critique these things because we love them. And for that, I apologize for absolutely nothing. Let us know in the comments below what franchise you want to see make a comeback, and leave a like and subscribe.